The broadcast began with a silence more deafening than any explosion. Across the galaxy, trillions tuned in, citizens, slaves, rebels, and rulers, all watching the same flickering image. A boy, barely 11, kneeling on a steel platform beneath the twin suns of Zeroth Prime. His wrists were bound behind his back with charge restraints, his ankles chained to the cold ground. Bruises marred his cheek. Dried blood crusted his lip. He stared forward, not blinking, not flinching. A human child sentenced to death by the Galactic Empire. The Chancellor stood behind a shimmering energy podium, his long emerald robes catching the harsh wind. His voice, cold and metallic, echoed through every device tuned into the live stream. "This is the price of rebellion," he said, his tone void of remorse. This boy, this earthborn parasite, was caught infiltrating an Imperial relay station. He refused to give up his father's location. Let this execution serve as an example. Earth is not sovereign. Earth is ours. The camera panned, hovering in a slow, deliberate orbit around the stage. The audience of alien diplomats and Imperial governors watched with detached curiosity. On the outer edges, a few humans forced into servitude kept their eyes down, knowing that one glance too long could cost them their own lives. The boy didn't cry, didn't scream. He only raised his chin, gaze unwavering, and said, "He's coming." A hush fell. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. The Chancellor raised his hand, as if swatting away a fly, and gestured to the executioner, a hulking enforcer unit, part machine, part beast, wrapped in red Imperial plating. It stepped forward with mechanical precision, unfurling a monomolecular blade humming with violet energy. The camera zoomed in, capturing the glint in the boy's eyes. There was no fear, just a silence so pure it vibrated. The blade came down. No sound followed. Then a voice, somewhere off-screen, whispered into the stillness. "Oh, gods!" That was Baba Yaga's boy. The feed abruptly ended, cutting to the Empire's insignia. The transmission was archived, replayed across thousands of entertainment networks and propaganda outlets. But among the silence, in between the pixels, something else began to spread. A word, a name. In a remote part of space, on a frostbitten moon, where even the satellites dared not orbit, a man sat alone in a decaying wooden cabin. No heat, no electronics, only flickering candles and the deep, feral crackle of an old hearth fire. A knife rested on the table, blackened, curved, worn down to the handle from decades of use. Beside it, a photo. The boy, smiling, alive. The man reached the photo, held it in a hand veined like cracked marble. His other hand clenched the knife. He said nothing, but his breathing changed. Slower, deeper. A quiet storm building beneath the still surface. Far above the cabin, an ancient orbital drone activated without signal. It blinked once. Then again, a dormant code reawakened. One the Empire had long purged from its records. The cabin lights flickered. Sensors embedded in glacial ice came online. A dormant power grid, long thought dead, pulsed beneath the frozen soil. Across the galaxy, among intelligence analysts, warlords, bounty hunters, and exile resistance fighters, encrypted pings began to bounce between shadow servers. Old chatter resurfaced. "He's alive. He's not done." They shouldn't have touched the boy. On a military dreadnought orbiting Ressa 7, a high-ranking strategist dropped his cup of synth coffee as his holoscreen flared. His subordinate leaned closer, eyes wide with dread. "Sir, are you seeing this? It's—" "Don't say the name." The strategist snapped, already ordering encryption protocols. "If he's alive, if he knows." The subordinate swallowed. "Sir, what if it's just a rumor?" "Then pray it is. Because if it's not, we just executed the one thing that monster loved." In a criminal hideout on Nemea Station, a tattooed smuggler laughed hysterically, slapping the bar counter. "Idiots. They poked the boogeyman. You don't kill Baba Yaga's kid, man. You hide from his shadow." A new message circulated across the dark web's most secure layers. 3 words, and signed untraceable. Permission to engage. Back in the cabin, the man stood, his face weathered, scarred, and hollow, tightened. He opened an ancient chest. Inside were weapons untouched by time, blade, pistol, cloak, and something older than war, something handmade. He suited up slowly, each motion methodical, like a ritual, a soldier dressing for mourning, not battle. And when the last strap tightened and the final weapon clicked into place, the man stepped into the icy wind outside. Snow howled around him, as if even the storm knew to bow. He looked to the stars. Somewhere out there, they had taken his child. Somewhere out there, they had laughed while doing it. The ground trembled. He didn't scream, didn't growl, only whispered, "I'm coming." Then he vanished into the dark, and with him, the galaxy's last illusion of safety. Across the galaxy, the execution broadcast had already begun to decay into myth. Entire star systems were flooded with reruns of the Chancellor's speech, painted with victory, control, and manufactured order. But beyond the veil of imperial propaganda, something older than fear stirred in the shadows, something the Empire itself had spent decades pretending didn't exist. In quiet corners of high-security war rooms, even the most arrogant commanders refused to speak the name aloud. Baba Yaga. To most, it was a campfire ghost story, originating from Earth's forgotten history, told in whispers by mercenaries who had served in the Outer Rim during the human uprising. A tale of a man who couldn't be killed, who never missed, who erased entire outposts without a sound. He didn't leave survivors. He didn't speak. He just came and everything died. In truth, Baba Yaga was never a name. It was a warning, a designation. Earth's last failed rebellion had birthed many warriors, but only one became legend, Jovan Rurik. Classified files buried deep in the Empire's forbidden archives told pieces of the story. He had been born in the burned-out ruins of Kiev after the first orbital strike, raised in bunkers, trained by ghosts of militaries that no longer existed. By the time he was 17, he had infiltrated Imperial supply routes, assassinated a fleet admiral, and disappeared into the tundra. Earth's resistance never formally acknowledged him. He wasn't part of a unit. He didn't wear a flag. He moved alone. And when the final cities fell, and Earth's command signed its surrender, Jovan didn't come to the table. He vanished, along with a newborn child. No records, no trail, just smoke. But now the child was gone, executed for the crime of blood, and the man had returned. In a cavernous war chamber aboard the Empire's core defense fleet, Admiral Varix stared down at the intelligence dossier that flickered in front of him. Cold sweat clung to his neck, despite the freezing climate control. "I want confirmation," he said quietly. "Visual proof. Is it him?" Across a holodeble, a communications officer shifted uncomfortably. "There's movement on Enceladon 9, a surge in power that matches Earth resistance encryption." Something ancient woke up. We picked up the voice signature. Match confidence, 97%. Varix shut his eyes. And what did he say? The officer hesitated. Just 2 words. "I'm coming." All over Imperial space, the reaction was the same. Panic dress and protocol. Border posts locked down. Checkpoints doubled their inspections. High-value targets were relocated, hidden behind triple layers of defense. Warlords and crime barons started buying one-way tickets to uncharted systems, quietly scrubbing any evidence of dealings with the boys' executioners. But none of it would matter, because Jovan Rurik didn't come for noise. He didn't come with armies or fleets. He came like a virus, silently, fatally, and by the time you realized he was there, you were already bleeding. In the underbelly of a dying freighter drifting near the Gas Curtain Nebula, a former Earth Resistance hacker known only as Echo received the signal. Her hand shook as she traced the origin pulse. "No one else could have sent that," she muttered. "He's back, after all these years." Her companion, a grizzled cyborg with half a face of scar tissue, grinned. Then the stories were true. That freak really did bury himself with the dead, and now he's crawled back out. "They killed his son," she whispered. "They thought he was off-grid. Forgotten." The cyborg leaned closer. "Then they just made the last mistake they'll ever make." Back on Enceladon 9, the frost-covered cabin had collapsed under the force of Jovan's departure. His signal had not gone unnoticed. An orbital station that hadn't functioned in 2 decades roared back to life, unlocking ancient caches of equipment buried beneath the ice. Automated loaders retrieved gear built by the Resistance before Earth's fall, low-EM signature tech, hardened exosuits, and a stealth-class interceptor ship known as Wraithborn. Inside the armory, Yovan stood in silence. His body was lean and wiry, coiled like a blade ready to unsheath. Time had not softened him, it had sharpened him. His face was lined with hard edges, his expression carved from stone. The cloak he wore shimmered with embedded disruptors. His left eye glowed faintly, cybernetic, calibrated to low-light thermal. He didn't speak to the machines. He didn't need to. They responded to his presence, as if remembering their true master. In his hand, he held a small, cracked hologram of Isaiah. The boy, maybe 7 at the time, grinning with teeth too big for his face, holding up a wooden carving shaped like a hawk. Yovan stared at it for a long time, unmoving. The moment passed. He turned and approached the ship. Its engines pulsed low, hungry. His steps were soundless, each one carrying the weight of memories soaked in blood. Inside the cockpit, systems activated. Destination coordinates loaded. He didn't look back. As Wraithborn lifted into the upper atmosphere, frost and snow ripped away from the launch zone. The stars bent around its hull. Cloaking engaged. It vanished. And across the galaxy, darkness began to whisper again. He was coming, and he was not merciful. The first strike came on the mining world of Virex, for a sulfur-choked planet where oxygen cost more than life. The Imperial garrison station there wasn't expecting anything, least of all death wearing silence like a second skin. By the time the local comm station registered the anomaly, the eastern compound was already gone. No alarms, no survivors. Just a static-filled message looped into the orbital relay. For Isaiah, it wasn't a war. It wasn't even a retaliation. It was a dismantling. Systematic, precise, purposeful, like someone extracting bones from a body without breaking the skin. Yovan didn't leave his name. He didn't need to. The corpses told the story for him. 28 soldiers, each executed cleanly. No scorch marks. No heavy weapon signatures. Most were found with their own weapons turned against them, as if they'd been outmaneuvered before they could blink. One, only one, was left alive, trembling inside a sealed locker, mouth gagged with his own uniform. He was found by a retrieval unit hours later. When they asked what happened, he could only whisper, "He watched me breathe and let me live, told me to tell them he's not finished." News of the strike spread like a virus. The name resurfaced in command terminals, old warnings blinking to life across forgotten subroutines. Rurik, Yovan, Class X hostile, kill on sight, do not engage alone. Fleet captains requested reassignment. Governors on outer systems resign overnight, citing sudden illness. Even bounty hunters known for skinning targets alive quietly erased contracts that mentioned Earth. The Empire responded as empires always do, violently and blindly. They deployed enforcers to high-risk systems, tightened patrol routes, and increased civilian interrogations. It only made things worse. More bodies began appearing. A slaver barge in orbit over Kepler-6, found drifting, all oxygen vented. Command crew strangled with synth wire. A former intelligence officer, last seen in the Imperial capital, discovered dangling upside down from a hover bridge, eyes burned out, and a single phrase carved into his chest in Old Cyrillic. He remembers. Each strike was more targeted than the last. Each victim had played a role in the execution of the boy. Some had signed the order. Others had delivered him. A few had only watched and laughed. It didn't matter. They were all marked. But Yovan wasn't alone anymore. After the fourth attack, a signal beacon was triggered from the deep ruins of forgotten Resistance archive hidden beneath the crust of Demos X. It summoned Ares X, an autonomous combat unit designed during the last years of Earth's defiance. 7 feet tall, forged of quantum-infused alloys, Ares X had been decommissioned after the fall. No AI should have still been functioning. But Yovan didn't trust anything he hadn't broken and rebuilt himself. When the pair reunited in the bowels of a derelict hangar, Ares X scanned him for 8 seconds before uttering a single line. Target confirmed. Execution protocol reauthorized. Welcome back, Warden. Together, they began carving a path through the Empire's hierarchy. Their method was not brute force. It was surgical. Yovan used the shadows, always arriving before he was expected, always leaving before reinforcements could arrive. Ares X handled the moments when noise was necessary, disabling power grids, melting security mesh with plasma bursts, clearing entire corridors in seconds. They never struck the same place twice, never repeated patterns. But every victim had a common thread. They were complicit. Inside the Empire's War Council chambers, panic metastasized into obsession. The Chancellor's advisors demanded explanations. Why haven't we killed him yet? Why does a single human matter? Why are our soldiers afraid to sleep? The truth was simple. They had created him. And now, he was repaying the debt. Among the few who dared watch the execution footage again, a pattern began to emerge. Yovan wasn't just seeking revenge. He was unraveling something deeper. The soldiers he eliminated weren't merely guards. They were linked to Project Pale Sun, a black-budget initiative buried inside the Empire's intelligence branch. The boys' capture had been intentional. Bait. Isaiah hadn't stumbled into a relay station by accident. He had been looking for something. Something Yovan had likely hidden long ago. The realization made the Chancellor's blood run cold. It was never about vengeance alone. It was about finishing what had begun before the fall of Earth. On the shattered world of Draxos, Yovan and Ares X hunted a final name from the list. General Vorkin, the man who had given the order to televise Isaiah's execution. He had gone into hiding, protected by an elite guard and 3 layers of psychic shields. But Yovan didn't care about shields. He cared about justice. They breached the fortress in under 15 minutes. Ares X drew fire, while Yovan vanished into the ventilation systems. When Vorkin's guard went silent, he began screaming into the columns for extraction. None came. The general's final moment arrived with the soft click of a blade behind his ear. Yovan didn't offer him a speech. He didn't roar. He simply leaned in and whispered. He said, "He's coming. You should have listened." The blade slid home. By the time the Empire realized what was happening, half of Project Pale Sun's architects were dead, and the remaining few had gone into deep stasis, hoping the legend wouldn't find them. But hope was for civilians. Yovan Rurik had declared a war the Empire didn't understand, because it wasn't a war of territory or politics. It was personal, and he wasn't done. They called the capital world Invictus, untouched, invincible, a monument to imperial dominance etched into orbit around a synthetic sun. Dozens of planetary shields pulsed above it like armor plates, each protected by deep space cannons, orbital fleets, and psychic detection grids. It was the one place the Empire believed immune to intrusion, the throne world upon which the Chancellor sat encased in luxury, arrogance, and control. It took Yovan 3 days to reach it. Wraithborn entered the system under the guise of a diplomatic courier ship, its cloaking matrix modulated by fragments of forgotten imperial cipher. Yovan had pried from the mind of a psychic handler on Banshee's moon. The ship threaded itself between orbital patrols like a serpent through tall grass. At precisely the second predicted by Ares XS simulations, one of the planetary shield relays suffered a cascading failure, triggering a system-wide diagnostics lockout for 92 seconds. That was enough. Yovan and Ares X deployed through a kinetic drop pod, slamming into the upper tower of the Ministry of Control. They emerged in fire and silence. Within seconds, guards lay strewn in twisted arcs of steel and plasma, their final moments reduced to static and blood. The upper corridors fell one by one, executed with mechanical precision, no wasted movement. Yovan moved like a shadow, and Ares X followed as the echo of ruin. Inside the Imperial Palace, alarm screamed. The Chancellor's private security activated suppression teams, psychic dampeners, and elite biomodified guards. They blocked corridors with fusion barriers and flooded vents with atomized neurotoxins. Nothing stopped the advance. Yovan moved through every layer like memory, reclaiming itself, unrelenting, unhesitating. The faces before him were just echoes of the ones who had clapped as the sun died. They wore medals, bore titles, gave speeches. None of them mattered. Each step forward was a sentence, each bullet a comma, and this chapter would end with a full stop. They reached the central throne chamber, in under 14 minutes. The Chancellor stood at the apex of crystalline dais, surrounded by his remaining sentinels, their eyes glowing from augmentation and fear. The room was vast, domed with stained glass mosaics of past conquests, now fractured with smoke and shrapnel. Yovan stepped forward alone, his blade sheathed, his eyes cold and quiet. "I know who you are," the Chancellor said, voice trembling behind feigned poise. "You're just a man, a dead one." "No," Yovan replied. "I died when you murdered my son." Ares X neutralized the guards in seconds. The Chancellor stumbled back, reaching for a hidden plasma pistol embedded beneath his podium. He never touched it. Yovan was already in front of him, grabbing the weapon mid-draw, crushing it in his palm like brittle glass. "There was a purpose," the Chancellor choked. "Project Pale Sun, your son was a key he carried." "He carried no weapon, only hope." Yovan lifted the Chancellor by his collar, dragging him to the center of the dais. Across the throne chamber, the broadcast console blinked to life. Imperial channels were forced open, hijacked, and within moments, every screen, every holodeble, every neural visor across the Empire flared with a forbidden signal. Yovan stood before the galaxy. "This is not vengeance," he said, voice calm, clear. "This is not justice. This is remembrance." He looked down at the Chancellor, bruised, weeping, pathetic in the shadow of his own legacy. "You burned Earth. You killed my son to break a myth. But myths are born of truth, and truth does not die." Yovan turned his gaze to the camera. "I am not a symbol. I am not a name. I am a man. And I remember." The Chancellor began to beg. He promised credits, pardons, information. Yovan silenced him with a look. "I asked nothing of you," he said, "and you took everything." He pressed the blade to the Chancellor's chest and pushed, slow, deliberate, not for spectacle, but for meaning. The Empire's heart stopped beating live before its own eyes. Yovan stepped back. Ares X initiated the detonation sequence that would collapse the palace dome and wipe the core command structure. But Yovan remained still, eyes fixed on the boy's face in his memory, eyes that had looked up one final time and whispered, "He's coming." It was done. When the chamber collapsed in on itself, only flame and silence remained. Hours later, across systems that had long forgotten the taste of defiance, symbols of resistance lit up again, scratched onto metal walls, painted across city ruins, embedded in encrypted networks. He had come, and he had kept his promise. Yovan was never seen again. Some said he vanished into the wreckage. Others claimed Wraithborn had lifted from Invictus moments before the core imploded, disappearing into untraceable stars. But none of it mattered now, because across every world, from the ash-choked colonies of Vega to the methane fields of Caldris, they spoke his name in awe and in fear. Not Baba Yaga, not the myth, Yovan Rurik, the man who remembered and made the galaxy remember with him.